Hi, I'm Alicia Michelle, and as a trained and certified Christian mindset coach, I've helped hundreds of Christian women discover brain science-based mindset tools to help them grow closer to God and break free from anxiety, perfectionism, people-pleasing, and feeling like they're never enough. The Christian Mindset Coach is the award-winning podcast that shows you how to use simple brain science principles and biblical truth to renew your mind for lasting confidence, joy, and peace. I'm so glad you're here. Grab a cozy spot and let's get started. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of the Christian Mindset Coach with me, Alicia Michelle. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to record today's episode. Let me tell you, this episode is on aging, as you have heard. And I am just super passionate about this topic. And as I sat down to prepare for this episode, I felt the Lord giving me tons of scriptures, tons of great insight that I'm like, oh, wow, we need to talk about this. And just to top it all off, as I was about ready to get ready to record today, I was like, okay, I just don't want to go in my room and get dressed and put on my makeup and do all of the things that I would normally do when I am recording an episode, because I usually record video along with the audio. Today I was just like, it's been a long week. I don't want to do that. I am not doing that. The point of recording this episode, at least right now, is for the audio. And I have been recording video, but how often have I been uploading them? Not too often. So I'm going to focus on really, and kind of goes perfectly with what we're talking about today. I'm going to focus on what's important. I'm going to focus on the inside, not the outside. When we think about aging, there's a lot of tricky stuff that comes up. How will I handle all of these outside changes? I mean, we see our body getting wrinkly. We see stuff sagging that didn't used to sag. We feel like we may be exercising, but the exercising doesn't really help the way it did before. We find that when we eat certain things, our stomach doesn't agree with them, or we used to be able to eat a lot more, and now it kind of shows up in our hips when we eat it. Stuff like that. Just who is this that has taken over my body? Since this episode is being released the week of my 50th birthday, I wanted to talk about it because so much of what this season is of aging is about mindset. And there's all kinds of really interesting layers that are put on for us as Christians going through this. And I think we can reframe and actually get excited about some of the stuff happening. I want to be real about some of the things we face, but I also want to say, what does God want us to be focusing on in this season? So, of course, there's that first question of how will I handle the changes that are happening? It's kind of the one that gets our attention first. As I am recording this, there is a new book that just came out from Brooke Shields. And if you know who Brooke Shields is, she's a very famous actress. She's been around forever. Her career started when she was a teenager. And the name of this book is Brooke Shields is Not Allowed to Get Old. And I'm like, okay, that's perfect. But it really encapsulates this idea of women in this age and what are we supposed to believe? How are we supposed to think about our bodies? Should we be making changes to help our bodies not age as quickly? We really are confronted with those sort of questions. I appreciate that she's bringing that at least to a larger segment of culture. We also are asking ourselves, who am I now? Who am I? Maybe for all these years, you've had the role of being the mom, or you've had the role of being the wife, the person who has this certain job or does this certain role. And as life changes, that all kind of comes up in question. Certainly as a mom, things change. Your kids don't need you in the same capacity that they did, although I'd argue that they still need you. You suddenly have different levels of freedom in your time. Your marriage may be changing. If you're married, your husband's job may be shifting in terms of his responsibilities. You may be looking at retirement. It's unnerving in so many levels that it's no wonder why there are so many people who have these midlife crises. The other question I think that we're thinking about is, what's God's purpose for me in this second half of life? It's very easy to feel invisible or to feel irrelevant, like the good days are behind me, like everything that I have done in my life, I've already done it. Now, again, I'm speaking from someone who's 50. I know that perspective changes as you approach 60, 70, 80, 90, beyond. I get that is going to have a little bit of a different shape to it.
But I think this is the time of life around the age of 40 and 50 when we start saying, what is my purpose? We know that first half of life it seems to be about creating the foundation of family and career and focusing on growing and settling ourselves. And now it's like we're at this place where we're like, what is the next chapter? Now I understand, again, not everybody follows that exact path, but I hope you track with what I'm saying here, that there is this kind of a shift that happens at this age. And the gift to me of all of this is that I have recognized and really began to get excited about and embrace the idea that I get to decide what's important to me. I get to decide how I want to fill my time and my days to a much greater degree. Keeping in mind, of course, that everything that I'm saying is about, when I say I get to decide what's important to me, I mean within the context of what God wants me to do. So please hear me in saying that. I'm not just saying, well, I don't want to do anything that has to do with anyone else anymore. No, I'm saying within the context of serving the Lord, there's a lot more freedom and there's a lot more confidence in me, I think, to say, I don't need your permission to do this or to not do this. For example, I just had someone email me about something, a friend of mine, sharing about an opportunity. And my old response, like my first response would have been that people pleaser response of like, maybe I should say yes, like all of that kind of dialogues that maybe I struggled with, 5-10 years ago. But instantly the louder voice now is, but that's not a fit for me. And that's okay. Right? I think the longer you live, the more you begin to see, I like this and I don't like this. And they can like this and that's okay. I can have this area over here that is a better fit for how God made me. And man, when you can get to that place of saying, this is how we want to structure our family time. This is how we want to structure our time alone. How much time we spend together, how much time we spend apart. Like once you're able to figure out what that is and you're comfortable with that, again, always checking in with the Lord. When you get to that place, it's like, wow, this is a better example or greater sense of that abundant life that God gave to give us. We've lived long enough to know ourselves and to know Him and to know where it all kind of comes together. And we now have some different shifts in our time where we can begin to pursue things that we haven't done to this point. The big crux that we have to address here is the mindset piece. It is super easy, very easy for us to slowly, and I do mean slowly, I mean incrementally, toothpick by toothpick added to the camel's back, sort of slowly sink into sadness, into frustration, into despair about the changes that we're seeing. We can see our body shifting. We can see maybe our kids are moving away. We can see I'm not as needed as much at work and these responsibilities. We can see these things. These things are shifting our perspective. If we are not going to pay attention to them and address them, they can absolutely derail us. So when we feel and notice those things happening, we must learn how to look deeper and actively decide, I'm going to refocus my thoughts on the reality of my life as someone getting older. I am going to recognize that some things are bound to happen and are happening, and I don't have to be shocked by it. Like this is a normal path of life. And so I want to talk about some aspects of that today, some truths that we can really truly refocus and keep our thoughts fixed on that relate to us living well in this second half of life for Christ, and then gives us some 5 action steps, things that we can do moving forward. These are the things that I'm focusing on. We are at a point in culture where it has never, honestly, I feel, been harder to be a woman who is not 20 years old, in perfect shape, got the perfect body, whatever look, we're going for. It's never been a harder point in culture to not be that, because it is so thrown in our face all day with social media, with television, and there's not a lot of dialogue about, especially as a Christian, how to work through those feelings well. So that's the point of today's episode, is how can we manage these well? So let's talk about some truths that we can focus our mind on as we're going through this aging process, as we're looking the second half of our lives. And before I get into these, I wrote all of these from the perspective of I get to, because really all of these are get tos. They're get tos. This is a unique get to that we have at this point in life, and not everyone has that opportunity. So the very first one that we can focus our mind on is I get to rejoice in the inner growth that God continues to do in my life. 2 Corinthians 4:16 says, "Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day." When we get to this phase, we begin to see that the growth that we can be most excited about is the growth that's happening inside. It's these beautiful treasures that have been slowly accumulating after years and years of knowing Jesus, of learning about who he made us to be, of seeing our family and our friends grow and triumph and walk through hard times and get to the other side. Like, it is the gift and that we get to see of the growth that God's doing in life, so that we can focus on that. The second thing we get to focus on is I get to be the storyteller. I get to be the truth conveyor. I get to be the person to testify to the next generation about the true character of God. Deuteronomy 32, verse 7 says, "Remember the days of old. Ask your father, and he will tell you." Isn't that good? We get to be the people who know the stories of God being faithful, of God showing up. We have time and all kinds of testimonies, not just in our life, but of other people's lives. We've seen God's faithfulness, and there is a whole group of people younger than us in the faith, whether they are younger in age or not, but we get to have walked with God long enough, again, assuming that we came to the Lord at a younger age. Maybe some of us may have come to the Lord in the last few years. Either way, we still have stories to tell. We are going to be the ones that they're looking to as we're telling these stories. And what a gift. What a gift to have that as the ability to encourage and point people back to the character of God. Number 3, I get to continually have the opportunity to do a heart check on my value of myself, on my value of my body, on my value of what lasts. And I think this really keeps our hearts pure before God in what we do with our days. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3 says, "The grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of our God will stand forever." We see the gift of time and change, and we get to notice, what is it that I've put my foundation in? What is the strength of my heart? And this is why I think so many people can have these midlife crises, because they have been coping. They've been getting by on the things of this world, and that'll get you by for a little while. But as beauty fades, as maybe the money runs out, as maybe just culture shifts and this no longer works for you anymore, now these things are fading. And the good news is, the gift here, again, that we can focus our minds on, is that we can know these truths. We can truly know them, not just say them, because it's really easy for us to know the truth that, I am known by God, I am loved by God, my value is in God, and then we can live differently. But in this season, when we do see those things starting to slip away, we can go, okay, so once again, I am pointing myself back to the reality of, even if this is lost, such as beauty, even if this is lost, such as my ability to do certain things that I could always do, but I can't do anymore, I know that that's not the strength of my life. That's not the focus of my heart. And I think the problem with the midlife crisis is that it's been building and building and building for years, perhaps, in a person, and they haven't been noticing it. They haven't been addressing it. They just kept pushing it down until all of a sudden it's like, boom, the changes have to happen, like that boiling pot of water. It just busts out. So this is our opportunity to slowly have that heart check and to work with God to gracefully age into these places, to gracefully make these changes. Another truth, I get to experience one of the greatest gifts of all, which is godly wisdom. There's a beautiful scripture in Proverbs chapter 4, verses 5-9, it says, "Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you." The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. Cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will give you a garland to grace your head and present you with a glorious crown. We will never get to the depth of understanding all of the Lord's wisdom. We won't have that until we are fully reunited with Him in heaven. But it is so amazing every day to be growing in wisdom. The longer we walk with the Lord, the more we see His truth reigning supreme in creation, in our life, the more we choose to obey, the more we choose to seek wisdom, the more it grows in our heart. And that honestly brings such peace and such freedom. Okay, this fifth get to, these reframes we're doing for ourselves in this season. I get to see God using me in exciting new seasons for different purposes. There's several verses here that encourage this thought, and one of them is Isaiah 46, verse 4, Psalm chapter 92, verses 12-14. That verse talks about how the righteous flourish like a palm tree and how we are still able to bear fruit in an old age, still stay fresh and green. So this is this gift of walking with God and seeing our treasure being in Him, and how when we walk with Him through these seasons, He still is able to keep us fresh, green, excited to be able to do His work. I was just thinking how the Lord used two older people in the very beginning of Jesus' ministry as people who were able to proclaim who Christ was. Do you remember that story of Joseph and Mary going to the temple to bring baby Jesus to be dedicated? So he goes to the temple, or they take him to the temple, and when they're coming out, they're confronted by these two people. Their two names were Simeon and Anna, and you can read more about them in Luke. So I actually want to share a little bit more about Anna. You can read this in Luke chapter 2, verses 36-38. And we read there that she was very old. She had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then she was a widow until she was 84. And taken this time in her life to, according to the word of God, it says she never left the temple, but she worshiped night and day, fasting and praying. And what happened was, it says she came up to them at that very moment. She gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. So this woman who had spent her life in devotion and had a different outcome to her life. She became a widow 7 years after she was married. But she chose to devote her life to the Lord, and she had the gift and the privilege at the end of her life to be able to give hope to people that this child that was born was the one who was going to bring the redemption to Jerusalem. Wow, what a cool calling, right? All of these changes that are happening really beg the question of, are we learning to notice what we're feeling? Are we developing that habit in ourselves of emotionally tuning in to what we're feeling, how we're reacting to certain triggers, what's happening inside of us? Because when we do that, we're able to experience the changes with grace. Because we're going to have change that's going to show up in our marriage, in our roles as parents, jobs, our physical bodies and capabilities. But the good news is that when the changes happen and we're aware of what's happening and we're asking God for help to work through them, and we're choosing to work through them, then it can be these graceful adaptations, and it can be a lot easier. Now, there may be these huge life-changing moments, kind of like with the story of Anna we just shared a moment ago, becoming a widow after 7 years of being married. I have a friend who's been on the podcast, Lisa Apollo, who lost her husband suddenly and became a widow at a young age. Just, of course, there are life circumstances that, we can't really prepare for and mentally work through that can shake us and, knock us off our apple cart, so to speak. Yet, I think you know what I'm saying. These ongoing little shifts in who am I? What is my value? Am I invisible? What does God want for me? How do I want to show up? These kind of questions. We start listening and paying attention to them. It can be more graceful than if we hadn't. So just with that in mind, I want us to think about some action steps, because if these are the things that I'm focusing on as I am moving into this second half of life, these are the things that I'm putting great value in. And number one is that what we were just talking about, staying sensitive to the changes that are happening inside, being real with God about what you're seeing and experiencing, and especially noticing the self-talk that comes up. If you notice things like, I'm not enough, I'm not at my prime, God can't fix this in my life, I'm too old for this. You might be too old to go climb Mount Everest. Like, let's just be real. There are realities that probably God's not going to be able to change like that in terms of our physical stamina or different things. He could. He's the miracle worker. But yeah, okay, let's be real about some of those things. But we need to acknowledge the changes that are happening and to not judge them about ourselves, like to grieve them. It is very sad and can be very upsetting to see our kids go off to college, to see our kids move away from us when we thought they were going to live close to us. Maybe to have a husband leave us when we weren't expecting this to be the outcome, to be how the story was going to end. There's all kinds of these midlife shifts and changes that weren't on the radar, or maybe they were, but they are still things that are happening that we need to embrace and work through. I guess I would say here is just to expect there to be changes, right? And don't be surprised by them if they come and when they come, but to notice what's inside and stay sensitive to them. The second action step that I'm working on is I want to be willing to work through what comes up. So it's one thing to be able to notice what we're feeling, but then it's another thing to actually do something about it. I can keep pushing it down, I can keep shoving it down, but it's so important to have tools like the ADD model that we talk about in emotional confidence. Things that are going to help you talk through the emotion in a reasonable way that honors the emotion itself, but also keeps that emotion in check with the Word of God and honestly invites God into the situation. Another huge thing for me that's been great in working through these changes is really paying attention to who I'm hanging out with and the friends that are surrounding me. One of the greatest gifts in this season for me has been our life group. I don't mean to sound like a commercial for life groups or Bible study, small groups, whatever you may call them at your church. But man, our life group is amazing. We are a group of parents of young adults. This is a unique season to be a parent of a young adult, just like it's a unique season to be a parent of a toddler. And wow, these people, every week we meet with them and we laugh, we cry, we share the reality of what it's like to walk through this. And that has given me courage to see and work through what has been coming up for me, because there are other people going through this. They have shared great advice. They have brought what I'm working through to the Lord. They're this team, and I appreciate them so much. So those of you who are listening, who are part of our life group, I love you. All right, but be willing to work through what's coming up. Get the tools that you need with you and the Lord to work through them, and create a community of people around you who also are like, I want to live and work through this season well. I want to do this with excellence. I want to love my children well and release them and let them go and be who God made them to be. I want to honor God in this season. I don't necessarily want to get caught up in having to all the other things that we can get caught up in, do the extreme things to our body, make all these changes. I'm not even going to touch that subject because I think everybody personally has to come to their own grips of that. I'm not going to judge anyone who has or has not had surgery, done Botox, all the things. I'm just saying, like, we have to come to our own conclusions. And once we have, surround yourself with people who are like-minded, who are going to support you and have that same mindset about these things. The third action step, it is so important, more than ever, I think, to take care of ourselves physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Maybe we could get by on the fumes before, friends. Maybe we could say, I can stay up late and get up early. Maybe we can push ourselves, but we're getting to an age, if you're in the second half of life, where what worked before for those sort of things isn't working anymore. And I used to really honestly be mad about this. I used to rail against this because I was like, God, why? Why are you taking that away? Because I could get so much more done, or I could, whatever. I could have a better attitude, but I can't because I'm tired. Like these things that are happening that are real. But he's taught me a different perspective on it that I'm still working through. but he's helping me get there. And it is that this is an opportunity to slow down and to nurture myself. Maybe I could get by on those things before, but the fact is that my body needs more downtime. That is a gift. It's a gift to have this extra time, to take more sleep. I think we treasure the things in life that are really important. Like, is it as important to be running all over the place and doing all these things because we have this more energy maybe when we're younger? What is life really about? Being able to slow down and savor. And as we get older, our capacity is limited or being limited continually. So we really get to focus on, I'm going to take the time that I have and the energy that I have, and I'm going to just absolutely focus it on this because this is what's important. So that's a gift to be able to do that. It's a gift. And then number 4, an action step I'm focusing on is I am excited. I am focusing on being excited and expectant about what is ahead. There was a time, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, where honestly, I had panic attacks almost every day about my children getting older. I couldn't look at my scrapbooks of them being young. I couldn't even think about them in those younger years. And I think it was a combination of these changes in me, seeing them become teens, move out of the house, get their own lives, seeing that start to happen. And again, feeling like, did I do enough to help them in this phase? Like, is what I helped them create or, input in them, so to speak, as a younger mom, is that enough for them in this season? Like, I just so desperately wanted to make sure I did it right. And as we see our kids making certain choices, you're like, is that my fault? You start to just have all of these things that come up. And for me, because I hadn't really been dealing with it a little bit at a time through all those years when I was just pushing my emotions down, it became this huge issue that, again, I would go into a panic attack thinking about it. And by God's grace, He has slowly helped me to get beyond that. And I've had to do a lot of work with Him to get there. It hasn't been a straight path. And I don't feel like there's a formula to get to the other side of that. But I have noticed in the last 6 months to a year that when I see those old pictures, I truly am able to look back and think, wow, that was a good time. That was beautiful. I really enjoyed having them at that age. I really enjoyed this aspect of it. And I think because for so long, I was so indoctrinated in my head of like, the younger years are the best years, so enjoy them while they're young. And, everyone puts this emphasis on the kids are so cute when they're young and that kind of stuff. And I was like, now they're at these older ages and like, I missed it. Like I missed the best parts of motherhood or something. So I think just now getting through some of that in that one aspect of my life, it's caused me to be excited because I'm like, wow, we have these amazing kids who truly, like, I feel like my kids, I love my kids so much. Gosh, they're just some of my favorite people. A side note, we got to go to Disneyland the other day with 3 of my kids. My oldest son didn't get to go, but the 3 other ones. And I left that day feeling so filled up with the reality that these kids were my kids, that these people that I got to hang out with were funny, they were joyful, they were laughing together. Like, we just had so much fun. They were people that I genuinely would have wanted to hang out with, period. And these were my kids, I know that that hasn't always been the story of our relationship. Just like I'm sure if you're a parent and you've walked through parenting and some seasons you're really close and some seasons you're not, man, but to know that where we're at now has come because we have had to work through some stuff. And we may still have bumps in the road later on, but the expectant and the excitement comes because I see, wow, look at what God has done and what He is doing and what's ahead. We have marriages for these kids. We have grandparenting that my husband and I get to look forward to and traveling around and seeing them. And oh my goodness, seeing them flourish in their careers. Like, these are also gifts. And I couldn't see those gifts when I was stuck in the being a mom as a young mom is the best part of it. So it's just been a really great journey for me. And that's where I'm continuing to grow in that area. And that kind of goes into the very last action step that I'm taking. And that is, I really am focusing on legacy, not on loss. I'm treasuring the gift of a longer life. 50, I know to many is not a longer life, but it's a longer life than someone who died when they were 49 or 40 or 32. I had that near-death health experience when I was 42. So I feel like everything after that is just bonus. God said, this is my second chance at life. And man, the last 8 years, my 40s specifically as a whole, have been incredible. I can't wait for my 50s and 60s because I feel like every year and definitely every decade, I become more free in being who I know God has called me to be. And I just get loosened up from some of those mindsets and just baggage that kept me bogged down for so long. And man, to be able to just live freer and freer every year and to experience Jesus in the midst of it, to see him at work, to have the opportunity to serve him. Friends, this is a gift. Getting older is a gift, and we get to treasure this time. Not everyone has that ability to have it. Not everybody has the ability to experience what it's like to do this. So these things, man, these are the things that I'm focusing on in this season. I would love to, if you are in this season too, man, reach out to me on Instagram. I want to hear, did one of these things really say yeah, that's where I'm at and what I want to focus on too? Or are there other things that you're like, yes, but I want to focus on this aspect of it right now, or this is a challenge that I'm having right now, Alicia. What do you think about it? Let's talk about it. Truly, let's have a dialogue about it. So you can find me on Instagram at Alicia Michelle Coach, and I would love to talk to you more there. All right. Well, again, like I said, this is in honor of my 50th birthday. So I'm going to get off here and go have some cake and enjoy this time with my family. We're actually going to be celebrating not just the day of my birthday, but I got a lot of little fun things that I got planned, and definitely even later in the year, taking the trip to Italy for the Italy retreat, taking my daughter with me on that. We're going to be having some other fun times outside of the retreat time that we're going to be exploring Europe and just so many great things. So I'm celebrating, and I hope that you can celebrate life with me today too. All right, friend, take care. I'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining me today for the Christian Mindset Coach. If you loved today's show, would you take 2 seconds and share a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts? I've got a special gift for you when you share a review, my amazing 50 I Am declarations, 50 statements and Bible verses about who you are in Christ. This is an audio meditation and a written statement that is extremely popular with my clients, and I want to give you access just for sharing your Apple Podcast review. Simply screenshot your review and send it to hello@vibrantchristianliving.com, and we'll send you the link to access the 50 I Am Declarations resource. Thanks so much for sharing your rating and review so that we can get the word out about the podcast. See you back here next week.